Good morning, my name is Hans Schut and I'm the author of the Scotch Gambit Modern Attack Beginner's Guide. Last week I published a video with an analysis of the difficult moves for Chapter 1 of the Scotch Gambit, and today I'm going to take you through the difficult moves for Chapter 2. So as you can see here, as an author I have an overview of what students consider difficult moves for every course that I created and then for every chapter. And this is the top 10 ranked based on number of mistakes. And on top we see the bishop c7, 11 bishop a6 line with 4,400 attempts and over 800 mistakes. And I will take you through the variation with bishop a6 and then also the variation with rook b8. First, I would like to go quickly to Lichess, and you know that I base my courses on what is being played in rapid and classical chess on Lichess. So it's really what club players will get over the board. And this is the starting position that we will consider today. So in the chapter 1, we considered the move bishop d7, and you can see that bishop d7 is being played about 70% of the time, and today we're going to look at bishop c5, which is played about 25% of the time. You can see that it's a tricky variation because black scores relatively well with 56%. So bishop c5 is a variation that I have encountered most when I play masters over the board. At lower levels you will see bishop d7. So after bishop c5, there is immediate pressure by the bishop and the knight on f2. And that is very important. And in the course, we are playing bishop e3, and that's a critical move to play. Just to highlight, if you would castle in this line, and you would just try to get into the same line, castle, knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6, black has bishop a6, and after bishop f8, bishop takes f1, king takes f1, there's queen h4. So this attack on f2, the move bishop a6, keeps reoccurring in these variations, and you can see, of course, here black is scoring 66%. So it is very important, and we will see that after bishop c5 we play the move bishop e3, and that's basically where the whole analysis is starting. So I'm switching now to ChessBase, so I can go into more detail. So this is the start of the line that we're considering today. Of course, Scotch Gambit, bishop b5, pinning the knight, knight e4, knight takes d4, and now we have a twofold attack on the knight of c6, but black doesn't defend and plays bishop e3. And I first want to go through the variation that's most popular, which is after bishop e3, black just castles. Bishop takes c5, knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, rook b8. And now you can see that there is a twofold attack of the queen on d1 and the bishop on c6 on the pawn on d5. Now the question is, why is it important to take that pawn immediately, and why can we not castle first? Or play knight c3 like we do in the bishop a6 line that we will see after this. Okay, so the course continues, queen d5, and now the queen on d5 is attacking the knight on c5, and trading for black is not good, because we can defend the pawn on c2 with the knight on a3. It looks ugly, but White can continue to castle long. The bishop on d5 is defending the pawn on a2. And in one of my games, so just to show the idea, rook d8, castle long, with a surprising double attack with the king threatening to take on b2, and a discovered attack of the bishop on d5 at f7. And that's how I won my game in the Title Tuesday against a 2500 plus player. Of course, it's blitz, but probably for club players, this can happen over the board too. So you could say that with playing queen takes d5 immediately, we keep the option in the position to castle long, and that is relevant, as we see here. And the second thing is, after castle, so in our course we're playing queen takes d5, attacking the knight, and then black defends the knight and avoids the queen trade with queen e7. That's how our course continues. But after rook b8, instead of queen takes d5, if white would castle, there's bishop a6 again that we saw before. Rook e1, rook takes b2, queen takes d5, same line, rook takes c2. So now black is not forced to defend the knight on c5 with the queen, because the rook is already defending this pawn. And black has achieved complete equality, and white has to be careful. The second move that is sometimes played after rook b8 is knight c3. Like I said, the move that we see in the bishop a6 line, and which is really critical there. But then after d4, the knight is under attack. There's no bishop takes a8, as we have in the other line, with the bishop on a6. And this knight has to go to d5, and we have lost the initiative. We're still equal, but I'd rather be black than white in this position. So that is an important move. Let's go to our main line of today. So bishop c5, played in 72%, it's bishop d7, and 26% bishop c5. Bishop e3 is critical. So let's look at some other moves. Some players suggest to play after bishop c5 the move f3. Of course, every pawn move has consequences. It attacks, the pawn on f3 attacks e4, but there's queen h4 again, and we lose the game. If we would play bishop takes c6, b takes c6, castle, black again has bishop a6, and now after rook e1, there's knight takes f2, followed by a double attack of the queen on h4, attacking the king on f2, and the knight on d4. So this motive of bishop a6 and knight takes f2, the pressure on f2, we keep seeing coming back. We castle first and don't play bishop e3, and we just continue our line, and we try to do without bishop e3. You can see now, bishop takes f1, king takes f1, queen h4. Again, we have queen h4, knight e4, and bishop c5 attacking. So there is no queen takes a8 that has to take back the bishop on a8, because black can start an enormous attack on the king on f1. Finally, of course, just we'll go back and say after bishop c5, we know that here there is the threat of taking, so bishop takes c6 runs actually into bishop a6, check here, and you can see that the king is mate if it wasn't for the queen on d1, who can interpose the check of the bishop on a6. So a lot of pressure on f2, and to get rid of this pressure is we play bishop e3. So we continue. Black castles. The pawn on e5 is under attack. So if we now casually would play castle, this pawn is being taken, and we are worse. Similarly, if we will play f3, again we fall for queen h4. So f3 is not well timed. We have to get rid of this attack of queen h4, and that's very critical. So after castle, we take the knight that is attacking the pawn on e5. Black takes back, and now bishop takes e5. Again, if we would take bishop takes c6, the bishop takes a8, and we have the same construction as we had before, that we saw before with the bishop on a6. So the pressure of this bishop on c5 and the knight on e4 on f2 in combination with bishop a6 is a very powerful weapon of black. Let's continue. So bishop takes c5, and now bishop a6. So actually this is a poor move, a dubious move, but it's all based on tricks, and that white doesn't know how to continue here. So this bishop on a6 is putting a lot of pressure on the diagonal a6 to f1. King cannot castle, is in the middle, and black would like to play queen g5, and queen g5 would attack the pawn on e5, the pawn on g2, and the square c1. So in this position, the idea of queen g5 attacking e5, g2, and queen c1 is a theme that keeps coming back. And we saw that this bishop is looking at the king and avoiding the king, and making it impossible for the king to castle. So how to continue here? So the critical move that you have to remember, so in this line, it's very critical that you remember bishop e3 first. So now, do not capture on c6, do not castle, bishop e3 first. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that in this position, it's critical to play the move knight c3, attacking the pawn on d5. And we can see, in this case, we would take here, there's this move queen g5, and white is in a lot of trouble, because after queen takes g2, the rook has nowhere to go. If we would take here, there's this queen c1, that was the other threat, and we are lost. If we take on d5, there's queen e5 check, and we are in big trouble. So queen g5 with the threat of taking on e5, taking on g2, with the rook on h1 having no escape, and the idea of queen c1 check is very critical. So we have to play knight c3. Also notice that if we would play queen takes d5, again there's queen g5 here, knight c3, rook d8, and now black threatens queen d2, checkmate if the queen would take on c5. So it's a very critical to play this knight c3. So two critical moves, bishop e3 that we saw before, and knight c3 here. And you can see here, because you can say, what's the difference if in this case, so we d4, right? If in this is so knight c3, if in this case queen g5 would be played, we can play queen d4, attacking the knight, knight e6, queen e3, and now if black would take on g2, we can just castle. So we go back, knight c3, no queen g5 because we have queen d4, followed by f4 or queen e3 and castle long. That's the idea. So we prepare this castle and we defend the pawn. So let me just highlight. This is too far. Queen g5. Apologies. After queen g5, queen d4, critical move, defending the pawn of e5, and preparing potentially queen e3 or f4, making it possible to castle long and get into safety. So that's the priority. So black continues d4, and now we just take here, queen takes, and we take again on d4, rook d8. And now we get to the following situation. So the knight on c5 is hanging. We can take the knight, queen takes the c5, but then there is queen takes g2. And if we play queen h4, and now after queen g2, we take the rook on d8. So you could say it's an active defense. It's like after queen d4, rook d8, we go to h4, attacking the rook on d8, making it impossible for the queen to take on g2. And then we consolidate with knight e6, rook d1. So that is the idea. So just to come back to this line, it's not often played. But what are the critical moves? Knight d4, bishop c5, bishop e3, that's the first critical move. We saw all these ideas of bishop a6 and taking on f2. So bishop e3 is critical, that's the first thing. Then castle. And after knight takes c6, we exchange a lot of pieces. And bishop a6, now the critical move is to play knight c3. And after d4, we take bishop takes a8. Notice also that in this case, if black would take on c3, we exchange the queens and we play b4. Critical move to play b4. And we have a winning position. So critical moves, bishop e3, knight c3, then bishop a8, queen takes d4, and then queen h4 attacking the rook on d8 and preparing rook d1. And in the end, black's attack evaporated and white is an exchange and a pawn up. So tricky line, you have to know a few specific moves, but if you know those moves, you get a winning position in the end. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.